We reinvented our life over 50, and in this video we're sharing why we did it, how we did it, and advice for anybody who's going through their own reinvention after 50.
Hi, I'm Matt.
And I'm Dawn.
And we're the Unretirees, and last year we decided to not take the traditional retirement plan. We said no to it, and instead we wanted to live abroad and work remotely, and that's exactly what we do from the Silver Coast of Portugal. And this channel is about living abroad, flexible streams of income, and travel over 50. If this content is of interest to you, it'd be great if you liked this video, subscribe to this channel, and click the bell so that you're notified of any new videos that we have.
So we feel a little bit rusty because we took a break for the holiday. We decided to take a week off and enjoy the holiday, and we've also been putting the final touches on our Moving to Portugal course. Just a reminder to join the wait list. This is your last chance to join the wait list, and when people join the wait list, we're going to give big discounts. We're going to give exclusive bonuses. I mean, you guys are going to be VIPs, so you don't want to miss out on that experience. If moving to Portugal is of interest to you, we definitely encourage you today to join that wait list. This is a last chance kind of thing, so we're excited about that. But today we're talking about reinvention. This is kind of a popular topic, but I've been really hesitant to do a video about it because I feel like whenever I hear the word reinvention, especially reinvention after 50, it sounds like somebody is broken or their life has fallen apart. And sometimes that's true, like life is full of surprises, but I don't think that's how we think about it. I think that it's just, you know, how do you think about this stage of life after 50 with intention, because like reinvention is necessary at this age, whether you want to do it or not, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And we had to go through a few reinventions, but certainly to Don's point, for any of us who are lucky enough to live to a ripe old age, you have gone from oftentimes from being a parent to being an empty nester to being a 9-to-5 worker to not having a 9-to-5 job, to being a active person in your 60s to being less active, maybe in your 80s. And all of these things require some reinvention. So we're going to talk about a few of the reinventions that we've had, 2.5 reinventions that we had in our life here over the last 12 or so years, because I think that one, it's interesting for us to sort of think about the things that we've learned and the lessons that we have been able to apply to those things, but also that may be of interest to you if you're in a similar situation to see how other people have navigated through this.
Yeah, you know, when we were navigating through, we use the word navigate a lot.
We do.
When we were navigating through these changes, we kept looking for stories of people who were our age or who were in similar situations, and we had a really hard time finding those stories. And there were people who had done things at different life stages, or just it was different, and we learned from them, and we were grateful for that. But we wanted to create a space not only to share our story of reinvention, because we learned some things along the way that I wish that we had known, but also to give space for you guys to share your own stories of reinvention. Because like Matt said, we're gonna be in the business of reinvention at this age, whether we want to or not. Our careers are ending, our kids are moving out, or whatever is going on. And so how do we do this well? How do we do this with intention? And how do we do this and not feel like we're the only ones going through it? And so
right.
I think that was really the motivation for this video.
Right, and so our first over 50 reinvention happened. Renovation,
like
personal renovation.
Yeah.
Our first over 50 reinvention happened when we became empty nesters. So our youngest kid was getting ready to go off to college, and at the time we were living in the Bay Area. We had a beautiful house, we had a nice life, we had nice cars. I played golf every weekend, and we had a good community of friends that we enjoyed hanging out with, and so that was a pretty nice life. But the empty nest thing was a thing where we realized that the house that we were in was just far too big for what we needed, given that it was just the two of us. We wanted to make a different plan, and because we had flexibility in our work, we wanted to make a different plan and consider making a plan in a new location.
So like a lot of empty nesters, we were just faced with that question of, okay, what's next? And what do we want that to look like? And so we thought we were going to move to San Diego.
We did.
That was the plan. And then things kind of changed. We never made it to San Diego.
Well, other than to visit, no, we never made it to San Diego. Our youngest kid, when he was a senior in high school, he was accepted at NYU and went to NYU for one of these college weekend days where they're trying to do the final sell, college weekend day, where they're trying to sell the kids on making the decision to actually go there. We went along with them, and then there was, well, you can tell the story.
Yeah, so we were just walking around Manhattan. Our youngest was off doing a college thing, and we just turned to each other at the same moment. It really was just the same moment, and just said, well, what about New York? I got to tell you, we had always wanted to live in New York, but we had reached that point in life where we thought, well, that's just a dream that's not going to happen. And I think we were at peace with that. We liked our life. We had always dreamed about it, but we just thought it doesn't make sense, and it didn't make sense. I mean, if you looked at it on paper, that was not a decision that made sense.
No, I mean, we had a good life. We had cars and a 3,400 square foot house and lots of stuff and habits and other things. And the idea of moving to Manhattan and to a small 1-bedroom apartment was a thing that if you had asked us a few years earlier if we would be willing to do it, I'm not sure we would have said the same thing. But at this time, as empty nesters, it was like, yeah, we felt the weight of all of the things that we had. Yeah. And we felt the weight of the house. And it was like, let's just get rid of it all. I think that was really a freeing thing.
Yeah, but there was a lot. I mean, it's easy to forget now, but there was a lot of, well, this has to happen, and this has to happen, and this has to happen, and this. And it felt like this really long list of, well, if all of this happens, then we'll move to New York. And I think sometimes I do, whatever you want to call it, I think there are sometimes you're just meant to make a move or to make a shift. And we just had nothing but green lights that entire time. And it went so fast, and it was so, I want to say it was relatively easy, even there was a lot of stuff. And from the time that we made that decision, walking around New York, until the time that we put our suitcases down in our new home in New York, was 12 weeks. And we still talk about that day.
Yeah, and that included preparing our house for sale, getting our house on the market, getting the house sold, getting the house closed. Yeah. All of those things happened in those 12 weeks, plus us getting rid of all of the stuff that we needed to get rid of, finding an apartment here in New York or there in New York, and then making that move. We talked about the green lights. Well, it was accelerator down the entire time that we were seeing those green lights. It was a speedy 12 weeks. Lots of stuff happened. It's incredible that it all happened that quick, but that was really a great experience.
It was a great experience, and we thought that we were going to live there for 2 years, and then we were going to move to Europe. That was the plan. But what happened?
Well, we didn't, but I do want to say that one of the things about making a move like this was either going to be the worst decision that we ever made or the best decision that we ever made. And at the time in our life, it ended up being the best decision that we ever made.
100%.
There were, and we may talk about this again in the move to Portugal, but there were things you could anticipate with the move to New York, but it was so much better.
It was so much better.
So much better than we could have anticipated. And, Dawn mentioned that we anticipated being there only 2 years. Well, we ended up being in New York almost 9 and working in New York 11 years. And so it was great. I mean, part of it was I ended up making a career change and starting to work for a nonprofit in the city that I still work for. And that was a whole brand new thing. But
it just fell into your lap.
It really did. Yeah. But I think that the other thing was, we made so many good friends. We had so many good experiences there. That it was just incredible. So, Dawn, what do you think during this time, this transition to New York? What do you think we learned or gained from that?
Well, I think like most life lessons, it's all in looking back on it and gaining perspective. But the thing that I think about the most when I think about that move to New York is I think about there are versions of ourselves that exist on the other side of risk. When I think about all the amazing things that happened to us and that we got to experience when we lived in New York, and that we could have missed that if we were like, no, we're comfortable in California, we're just going to hang out, or there's too many unknowns about moving to New York, that's not comfortable. And I really do feel that there are versions of ourselves that we just never get to meet until we actually step out and take the risk and get really comfortable with the unknowns. And I think that was really a driving factor when we decided to move to Portugal as well. But what about you? What do you think we learned or gained?
Well, I think it was an amazing season for us. I think we met incredible people filled with passion and excitement around the things that they were trying to do. I think we learned for us that we could live without so many things.
Yeah,
I mean,
true.
just emptying out our house in California and moving. We didn't ship anything. It was only anything that we could bring on the airplane was basically what we brought to New York. And the fact that you're in a small apartment, so you really don't have storage or things that you can just bring in because you may need it someday. You really have to learn how to live in a very different way. And I think that it was really good for us to sort of free ourselves from the things that were really weighing us down.
And we didn't miss any of it.
We didn't miss any
I
of
can't think of a single thing that we ever had that I thought, after we got rid of it, that I thought, man, I wish I had that. It was so much easier to let all of that stuff go than we thought.
And we have a video about our decluttering experience that you can watch right here.
That, yeah.
Yeah.
So if New York was so great, why did we leave?
New York was great, and I think that the thing that was different was COVID happened, and it made New York very different, and it made our patience for New York very different. For a number of months, things were shut down. Restaurants shut down, museums shut down, activities shut down, everything shut down. Our office was closed. Most people were working from home. So really the only interaction you have other than on Zoom with the person is the person that you're in your pod with, who is Dawn here. And I think for us, it became a challenge to sort of pay for an expensive apartment that's small, and you're only...
You don't get to enjoy the city. That's why people live in New York.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't get to enjoy the city.
That's why people pay that exorbitant rent. Yeah.
Right. And so we decided that we wanted to get a place outside of the city, if for nothing else than just to have a place to be outside of the city.
Well, we had a plan. So we had decided that we were going to buy a house in Connecticut near the water, near the Sound actually, and that we were going to, while we were working remotely, we would renovate that house, and then once we were called back to the office, we would rent that out as a short-term rental, and then we would have a weekend getaway that we could use, that our boys could use, because they were living in New York City at the time. And so that was our original plan. That was,
and it worked out pretty well. I mean, we ended up buying a place that actually was on the Sound in Connecticut, and it also had an in-law unit above. So as we renovated the top unit first and put that on the short-term rental platforms to generate some income. And then we more slowly renovated the backyard in in the downstairs part of the house, which is where we lived.
We have a whole video about the
We do have a whole video
renovation.
about that as well.
Yeah.
I think it was great. It was challenging, and it was different than being in New York, and there were some pros and cons with that. But what do you think were some of the good things and some of the challenges of that?
For me, I have always lived in a big city. For most of my adult life, I lived in a big city, and living in Connecticut was really the first experience I had with living in the suburbs for any extended period of time. I absolutely loved it. I got out of the city, and I think at another time of my life that it would have driven me crazy. But I think I don't know if it was the pandemic or if it's age or other stuff that was going on, but I just really loved being in nature. I loved taking a walk on the beach. I loved having some more peaceful rhythms. That was what I got out of it. I was really surprised at how much I had changed, that I wanted something completely different. And it didn't take me very long to realize that I didn't think that we were going to move back to the city. What about you?
Yeah, well, I think, financially it was a smart decision. I mean, the mortgage that we were paying in Connecticut was less than we were paying in rent in New York City, so that was good. And then on top of it, we were getting a little bit of income out of the property, out of the in-law apartment on top, and so that was also positive. I'd say that you loved being in the suburbs and access to things like Targets and Home Goods and things like that. For me, it felt like we were just in the car so much.
Yeah.
After being in New
Going
York,
to Home Goods and Target.
after being in New York for 9 years without a car, and frankly, I liked that.
Yeah.
Being in Connecticut, where everything is a 15-minute drive away, it was a drag on me.
Yeah, but then things got a little bit rocky, right?
It did. So if New York was Reinvention 1.0, if California, New York was Reinvention 1.0, and New York to Connecticut was the 0.5. Okay. So now let's talk about what was the triggering mechanisms to get us to Reinvention 2.5.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so the company that I worked for and continue to work for went through some financial hardships like a lot of companies did during the pandemic. And there were several moments during that window of time where it wasn't clear that we were going to make it without making some significant cuts to staff. And from cuts to staff, I sort of viewed that my position could be vulnerable. And so as we thought about, the idea of getting laid off, and at this point I would have been in my late 50s or 60 years old, getting laid off at that age, you're sort of left with a couple of options, right? You're left with a couple of options. One is, do I just sort of ride off into the sunset and retirement? Or do I go and get another job and try to get another job at that age? Or is there something else for us? I mean, that was sort of what it felt like for us.
Yeah, I feel like we didn't really want to retire. We both felt like we had another at least 10 years of contribution, if not 15. But we also realized that we just did not have, other than not retiring, we didn't really have a plan for life after 50. We hadn't really thought intentionally about what we wanted this next phase of life to look like. And at that point, we kind of felt like we were in limbo because we knew that we didn't want to spend the rest of our days in Connecticut as much as we love that spot and love that house. And we had already by then decided we didn't want to go back to New York City. So we didn't really have a vision for what this next stage would look like. All we knew is that we still had that dream that we had really since we got married in Italy, which was that we really did want to move to Europe. And so at that point, that was a wake-up call. Fortunately, you were not laid off, but that was a wake-up call that we had to get real intentional, real fast about what we wanted our life to look like and what steps we needed to take to start to put that plan into action.
That's right. And so as we thought about what's next, we looked at, and we thought about moving to Europe. We looked at several countries, and we did a lot of YouTube research. And
you like your bunny ears.
I do like my bunny ears. And we ended up sort of getting a sense that Portugal was very much where we wanted to be because it seemed to match up with the things that we were looking for in terms of our next place. And so, we made some scouting trips out to Portugal, and we ended up with, part of our plan was we wanted to buy a place that we could own in Portugal. We felt like the prices were escalating quickly, and so we wanted to buy, and the rates were exceptionally low, and they're really still low in Portugal.
They're still low, yeah.
But they were exceptionally low that we just wanted to take advantage of that. But the plan was that we were going to just rent out the property until we decided it was time for us to officially retire or were pushed that way. And in our heads, we had in mind the year 2027. But there was a triggering event that caused us to push this in advance.
Yeah, so we were already starting to feel a little bit restless because we just felt like we've got this property in Portugal and we're waiting a really long time. We're feeling like we're in limbo here in Connecticut. I think that was a really important part of that.
And we're working remotely anyway.
We could work just as easily remotely from Portugal. And so we had been wrestling with that for a few months. And then one night we were driving home from New York to Connecticut, and we were going down the freeway at like 60 miles an hour or something, and a car pulled out in front of us from a dead stop. And to this day, neither of us know how on earth we did not end up in a fatal accident that night, and we're so grateful. But it was, again, like just this series of wake-up calls. I feel like this video should be called Wake-Up Calls. Wake-up calls after 50. But it was a wake-up call that we're not really guaranteed tomorrow. We're not really guaranteed 2027 or whatever the date is that we had. And so we made the decision that night that we were going to figure out a way to move to Portugal, to work remotely, and to not have to make the choice between contribution, which was really important to us, and living out this dream that we had of living in Europe.
Yeah.
So what do you think that we gained, or what do you think we learned from Reinvention 2.5?
Well, I think one of the things that you learn is you have to be flexible. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, whether it's the fact that the company you work for, if you are working for somebody, they hold your job in their hands, not in your hands, right?
Yeah.
So there's at least something to think about with that. But I think the other thing that was an important lesson, and you mentioned this, was there's no guarantee for the days ahead. And so if you've got it in your heart or in your plans that you really want to do something, that it's important to try to figure out how to make that happen. I mean, we know people who have planned to do activities, to travel or do other things once they retire, and something happens and they're never able to do the things that they had been saving and planning to do. And we didn't want to be one of those statistics, I guess. And so for us, it was important to try to figure out how to advance this well we can.
Yeah, I think also the thing that came out of this is just how important it was to create whatever lifestyle we created. It had to be something that was sustainable long term. So when we were in New York, as much as we loved it, we knew we wouldn't be there forever. When we were in Connecticut, we knew we wouldn't be there forever. And we really had to think about where is it that we could go that would be sustainable, even if things shifted around us again. Like we'd gone through COVID, we'd gone through potential layoffs and things like that. So what is a life that we can build that's actually sustainable for us for the long term? So now we're in Nazaré, we're in Portugal. We like it here, but I don't know if we'll be in this house, in this town, in this country forever. But the thing is that we could be. We have everything that we need. And so I think this has become a foundational base for other things that we want to do, whether it's businesses that we're building or travel that we want to do. I feel like we have a sustainable base. And from there, a lot of things are possible. We don't feel like we're in limbo anymore.
No, we don't. And in fact, we may be here in this house in Nazaré and in Portugal for the rest of our lives. And I think that it certainly is a possibility. It's just that life is long. We have, hopefully, decades more to live, and there may be shifts in our lives that cause us to rethink things. But certainly here, we're perfectly happy right now being in the Silver Coast of Portugal.
Yeah, and I think also something that's important is that, you think about other times of life and how everything is stages. I think we've talked about this before. Like when you're a kid, there's toddler, preteen, teen, whatever. And when you're in your career, there's entry level, mid-level, and senior level. And then you get to be 50 or 60 or whatever the number is. And it's just this big, like formless blob, right? But there's actually stages at this stage of life too. And what that means is that what you want or what's important to you at 50 could change at 60 or at 70 or at 80. And that, I love what you said earlier about just, staying flexible, because there are external things that can impact what you want or what you need or what that looks like. And there's also internal things like deciding I didn't actually want to live in a big city anymore. And so I think that was an important lesson too, that whatever reinvention you're in the middle of at over 50, it doesn't have to be for a lifetime, but just to know that things change and to create again, I just keep coming back to that sustainable base. I feel like we could weather a lot more now than we could maybe 5 or 10 years ago, and I think that's important.
I think that's right. So I think in terms of, as we sort of think about all of these reinventions, I think that one of the things that for me, I think is important is this concept of finding what you're running toward and not just defining what you're running away from or moving away from. I think that a lot of times you can be in a difficult situation and just be thinking, I need to get out of the situation, and going over here will get me out of the situation. But you really want to be in a place that has the things that you're looking for. You need to be able to articulate what you're looking for and why you're looking for those things, and then go to that place. And I think that when we moved to New York, that was a real positive thing. And when we moved to Portugal, it was a real positive thing. But in part of it was because we were able to define what we were hoping and looking for, and the positive reasons why we wanted to make those moves, as opposed to just what we were trying to leave. So
we didn't leave a bad situation in either of these.
No,
it was just
not.
about having more clarity about a vision for our life.
Yeah, so what advice would you have for anybody?
Well, listen, we made pretty drastic reinventions. We moved across country for one and moved across an ocean, but you don't have to do anything that drastic for a reinvention. I think that what has served us well is that we just keep coming back to the same 3 questions whenever we're kind of in this in between or making a decision. One of them is, what's working. The next one is what's missing. And the third one is what's the best next step? Because, making moves like this, you don't know all the answers up front. You don't get all the guarantees up front. Very often it's just taking a few steps forward, the steps forward that you know how to take, and allowing yourself to be surprised by what's on the other side.
It's so much better.
Yeah. So speaking of the other side, just a reminder to get on that wait list for the Moving to Portugal course if that's part of your reinvention. And if you want to know more about moving to Portugal, watch this playlist.